Shalom from Israel, I'm Ariel Ben Abraham. This week we're going to reflect on Psalm 56 by King David. This psalm is very related to the previous one, 55. It's the same subject. Actually, the first verse relates to the previous one very much. It has to be without enemies. In this case, of course, King David's enemies. It begins with one single enemy, as it was mentioned before in the previous psalm. But then continue with plural, with more enemies, with not one single enemy, with enemies. So let's start with the first verse. Be compassionate to me, God, for man wants to swallow me up. All day long he attacks and oppresses me. Then the second verse says, my enemies want to swallow me up all day long. For there are many who fight proudly against me. As we were saying in the last commentary, in the previous Psalm 55, we have two kinds of enemies. The enemies that we see in our exterior, outer life, and the enemies that we have within us, that we have to deal with also. Our mystic sages say that the outer enemies are a reflection of our inner enemies. So let's be aware of that. Those of us who have enemies, then we have to see what is the enemy that I see outside that is inside of me. And what this person, what this outer enemy represents. If it's envy, if it's jealousy, if it's haughtiness or arrogance, wrath, if it's indifference, if it is indolent, then we will know what kind of enemy is inside. So in other words, we're dealing with an enemy who is wrathful or who is violent by nature. Then we have to see what is inside of us that is violent and wrathful and anger inside of us. So that's the idea. We also said in the previous commentary that there are enemies that are within our immediate surroundings. So they are part of our community, part of our family, that we need also to face off, to confront. And again, all of this, the whole idea here is that everything that we experience in life is a reflection of what is in our own consciousness. So in this case, David is talking about single enemies in the case of the previous Psalm 55, and now he's talking about enemies, plural. Now, the difference between this one and the previous is that in this case, a single enemy and many enemies are in constant war, in constant conflict, in constant attack against us. So the variation is that before, there were enemies, but the circumstances were not specified. In this case, the characteristic is that the main one is that it is constant. It's like these enemies don't give in, don't give up. They're relentless. They're all the time. In other words, it's like an obsessive thinking, addicted behavior kind of thing. Obsessed approach to reality. That's constant. That's what it's called obsession. That's what it's called addiction. That's what it's called attachment. They're always there. Of course, we have to make, as we said before, we have to make our own inventory. It's like what is it that I am attached to? Is it my anger? Is it my arrogance? It is my indifference? It is my lust? It is my envy? It is my coveting? Those are we have to deal with. And then we have to defeat them. And we defeat them basically by doing the opposite of what they represent as the idea. And we know that, by the way. So if we are selfish, we have to be giving, compassionate, sharing. If we lust, then we have to be generous. We have not to be so self-attached to our own desires, but rather to put our own lust, our own desires in doing, deciding for something better for ourselves and for others, and so on. We wanted to bring up the differences, or the main difference basically, between King David and his son King Solomon. If you read the book of Psalms and the Hebrew Bible and the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles, you will notice that the history of King David is quite different than the history of King Solomon. And the main difference lies on the fact that King David was typically a man of war. He was the consummate, ultimate Jewish warrior. It is the paradigm of the Jewish warrior, the Jewish fighter. So he was a man who was at war with Israel enemies, his personal enemies, family enemies, all the time. And then in contrast to King Solomon, who basically his name is the one whose peace belongs, the one whose peace belongs to him. And again, peace in this case is not just the opposite of war, but it's also completeness, wholesomeness. When we are at war, when we are in conflict, we lack something. That's what we're fighting. There is something missing that we need to recover. Either our land as our life, is it our land, the land of Israel, or as our goodness, the source of our abundance, plentiness, fulfillment, delight. So we have to fight for that. And again, once we achieve this, then we are wholesome, we are complete, we are Shlomo, we're Solomon. In this case, the one whose peace belongs to is like the completeness belongs to. So there is no lack of anything. There is nothing to war against for or for something. So we mention this difference because it is essential for us to understand that we really come to our own peace, our own completion, completeness, when we don't have conflicts, when we don't have wars to fight, when we don't have enemies. Because nowadays, the fact of the matter is the opposite. I mean, we really are in constant war. And then David is asking God, be compassionate to me. Compassion, usually for the Latin root, is the one who suffers with others. So like, be compassionate to me, like come and suffer with me. It's not like misery loves company. That's not the idea. It's like come and see what my suffering is. Then you will have compassion with me, then you will help me, then you will give me your loving kindness. That's being compassionate to someone. That I see you suffering. That's compassion. The one who suffers with the others. Compassion. Passion as pain. So again, when we have compassion, then we have to know where we are. And then God knows where we are. So He has compassion of us. He knows. Actually, in the Hebrew Bible, some of the books of the prophets, is that in their suffering related God, in the relationship between God and Israel, in relation to God and Israel. One of them said, this is Zechariah or Jeremy. He says, in their suffering, God suffered. And His tribulations, in His ordeals, He was there with them. It's like, in other words, God knows what's going on with us. And again, let's translate this in our consciousness. It's not just necessarily like the old man up there, being compassionate for the children. That's the image that we read. But again, it's goodness. It's what is good in us as God. The highest awareness of goodness that we may have. Being compassionate. He knows. How does He know that we suffer? It's like goodness is a witness, or we don't have goodness. It's like love knows when we live in lovelessness. That's the way we understand that God is compassionate to us. Then we have to realize that our own goodness is calling up to us. It's like, where is your goodness? I mean, where is I in your life? And then goodness will know how much goodness we have or the goodness that we lack. The goodness that we don't have. And when we say we don't have, it's like the goodness that was replaced by ego's fantasies and illusions. The envy, the lust, the wrath, the coveting. It's like this was replaced by, they replace goodness in ourselves. Then that's goodness is compassionate to us. It's like, hey, this is the empty space that you left when you left me. But instead of goodness, you place something else there. This is how God is compassionate to us. So we have to understand God in a very practical way, not just the abstract or the metaphorical way. It's also very concrete, King David said it many times. Let's give thanks to God because He's good. His loving kindness is forever. Many times. And the world is built in loving kindness. It's sustained in loving kindness. Like, we cannot exist without that. We can't. Can't. We know that. Then God is our goodness. Then we go back to Him. Because that's what we need in order to be complete, in order to achieve this peace, this completion. And there is no enemies. Okay, let's continue. Then, again, the plea of David in this case is like, they're constantly against me. So again, we have to find out what kind of enemies are constantly there. They don't even sleep, they're there, attacking all the time. And again, as we said before, we have to watch out our addictions, attachments, obsessions. Those are the constant ones. They don't let us 1 minute. It's there all the time, all the time. Give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. At the expense of our health, our tranquility, our peace of mind and heart, at the expense of our goodness. And let's try to understand this in this context. So not just an exterior enemies that are going to fight us, they do actually. But again, the ones that are inside, that requires the most attention. And again, the example of David and Shlomo and King Solomon is that we really need to build a connection with God, with our enemies. That's why in our tradition we know, I mean, the scripture says that when David wanted to build the temple, Nathan the prophet told him, you can't because your hands are stained with blood. You're a man of war. So your son will build it. So it's like we cannot establish this connection with God. Even that David has a strong connection with God all the time. But the permanent one, the completed one, the peace one, wasn't there. And we have to follow the example in order to build the temple, which represents the permanent connection with God, Israel with God. Then we have to remove every conflict, every war, every battle, every enemy that we may have. Then King Solomon didn't have enemies. All the way around, all the former enemies came to Israel to pay the respect. Because it was the example of how human consciousness has to be. So let's continue. Verse 3. When I'm afraid, I will put my trust in you. In other words, God is depending on God's goodness, God's compassion. It's like, this enemy is the only way that I can get rid of these obsessions, addictions, is with your help. I trust you. You may do it. I cannot, you know what an addiction is? An attachment? Being obsessed with something? You may say, you can go to a mental health practitioner. May help, hopefully. But again, there are things that we cannot, even with taking drugs, we cannot get rid of that. They're there all the time. These enemies are there all the time, attacking, relentless. So, then we ask for God's help. In God I praise His word. In God I put my trust. I will not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? Because in this case, flesh is talking about the physical enemies. But at the same time, something that do not transcend. Flesh dies, corrupt at some point. Decay and dies. Okay, so flesh is temporary. We have to understand that. It's like this material world, everything, emotion, thoughts, feelings, passions, instincts are temporary. Everything is temporary. Why would I be afraid of this temporality? Verse 5, all day long they twist my words. This is interesting. Words really represent thoughts in the spoken word. So when we speak, we are reflecting the way we think. In this case, we have to go a little deeper and say they twist my words. It's not about I say love and they say hate, that they're twisting my words. It's the way I think, the way I understand, the way I believe. Meaning, when we have an obsession, an addiction, an attachment to some kind of behavior. This is what twist all this. Our goodness. The goodness that we want to make prevail in every facet and level and dimension of consciousness. The opposite of those negative traits that we are attached to or obsessed with or addicted to. Okay, so those are the ones that twist our belief, our essence and true identity. All the thoughts are against me for evil. And again, we have to understand evil as the opposite of goodness. It's not necessarily evil like, oh, this guy I was scared of, like in a horror movie. It's everything that is against what is good in us. That's evil. Verse 6, they conspire and lurk, watching my steps, like making me fall. It's like, when is gonna fall when I put this trap so he would fall? They are eager to take my life. What is it? Life in this case is goodness. Because what a lie when we are aware of goodness as our essence, reasons, fundament of our existence. Okay. Like they want to take away when we do something wrong, or we are a negative behavior, that's what we do. We're taking life away. And we bring in death, meaning the temporarity that we were talking about before, of egos, fantasies, and illusions. 7, shall they escape by iniquity? My anger cast down the peoples, God. In anger, cast down them. David is asking God, cast them down, take them out of my consciousness. They cannot escape evil. In other words, as we said, the temporality is that, we said in the previous commentary, 55, Psalm 55, wickedness kills the wicked. And again, by killing, we're talking about the essence of life, which is goodness, is not there anymore. So they may live 100 years in their wickedness, but that's death. Because anything they do is death. It's not goodness, it's not happiness, it's not plentifulness, it's not abundance. What do we have? Anger, frustration, destruction. That's what they have. So that's death, basically. Let's understand evil in that way. When we see that people are doing evil, this man is dead. He's not enjoying life. He's not enjoying goodness. Goodness is completely absent. So no matter what he has in terms of possessions, no matter what he is in terms of who he is, it's not producing anything good for him, for himself or for others. It's dead, basically. Let's understand it that way. Instead of seeing, oh, these people, look at them, the evil that they're doing, and believe that they're alive, be careful with that. Because at some point we will end up like them. You see, how come that they have so many things, so many possessions, and that evil? It's like, I may do the same. It doesn't make any difference to be good and evil, to have, possess. So we have to be careful. That's why we mentioned in the previous and the commentaries that the whole point is to bring goodness within a frame of ethical principles. So that we will know the difference. We will Verse 8, you number my wanderings. You put my fears into my tears into your bottle. It's like God knows our deals. Goodness know what we said before. What are we going through? Aren't they in your book? In other words, David is saying, the book of God is the book of life. It's like, it's evil, it's wickedness in your book also. Of course they're not. They're not part of life. They're not part of goodness. Then my enemies shall turn back in the day I call. I know this, that God is for me. If He's for me, who could be against? Since goodness is with us, what could be against? Because goodness is the cause of goodness. The result of goodness is goodness. This is what we have to understand this. My enemy shall turn back in the day that I call. In other words, every time that I evoke goodness of my essence and true identity, our essence and true identity, there are no enemies. Verse 10, in God I will praise His word. In God I will praise His word. What is the word of God? You may say, the Bible, yes, of course. But again, we have to go back to what we were saying before. What is God's in our consciousness? It's goodness, that's the word. The word as the expression of thought. And we know that thought precedes action. So every action that we may have, we may manifest, we may perform, do, has to be preceded by the goodness. By goodness. Then we will know what the result will be. 11. I have put my trust in God. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? And again, this is any flesh man. Looking about a material, temporary quality. What envy can do to us, what coveting, lust. Those things are temporary, those things don't last, they have no power. They depend on goodness in order to exist. But they feed themselves, the life that they have, taken from goodness. We said before, in the previous commentary, that even the weakest people, they depend on the goodness of others. They need to be fed, they need to be taken care of, they need guards to protect them. Protection, food, shelter, those are good qualities. Everybody needs them. They steal, they're good, they use it for evil. I mean, they steal, they're evil, they use it for evil. So in this case, men cannot do anything. Like, no matter what they do, even if they come and kill us, we know that our source of life is eternal. They will leave this material reality and we go somewhere from where we came from, which is goodness, in a different form that we don't know. People call it heaven, some people call it the world to come. But then we know. So we're not afraid. But our mission in this world is not just to be indifferent to evil and say, oh, I don't care, I will die and I will go to heaven. Our duty is to make goodness prevail, meaning we have to destroy, we have to eliminate evil and all the forms and ways and means out of human consciousness, wipe them out of the face of the earth. We're commanded to do that in order to make goodness prevail as the cause and effect of God's creation. When we don't see that, then we have to see what we do. If we don't see it in the world, then why we don't see it when we're not doing it? Okay. Verse 12, Your vows are on me, promises are on me, God. I will bring offerings of thankfulness, of gratitude to you. For you have delivered my soul from death and prevented my feet from falling, that I might walk before you in the light of the living. We were saying before. Who are the living? The one who really live. The one who walk in goodness, for the sake of goodness. That's the whole idea. For you have delivered my soul from death. That's exactly the point. You may say the physical death, yes, but at the same time, being dead by being alive. That's what we have to prevent. First and most of all. Physical death is a consequence. We all die. This is not forever. It's temporary also. But this is the kind of living that we're talking about. While we live, we want to know that we're living in goodness. So we're really alive. That's why we're delivered. Our soul, our goodness is delivered from death and prevent us from falling. So we may walk in the light of the living. Light is goodness, the goodness of life. Beautiful. So with this, we conclude our reflections on Psalm 56 by King David, wishing you, as usual, an abundantly blessed week. And until next time.